Hi everyone! In the last video, we've created our first robot which can answer a single question. Before we go further, let's talk about how exactly a C# program works. In the last video, we used Visual Studio to create a Hello Robot project and wrote some codes and then ran it in the Windows console. But how was the source code transferred to an executable application? Or more precisely, how can we turn the source code into a compiled.exe file and then run it as a console program? To understand this, we need to know the architecture of how a .NET Framework program works. We start by writing our program codes in an IDE editor. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, such as Visual Studio. Then use IDE compiler to compile the source code into a CIL. CIL stands for Common Intermediate Language. After that, we execute the CIL, then the CLR, the Common Language Runtime, transmit the CIL into machine code during program execution process. Machine code is the code that our computer really understands. Then our computer, in our case, Windows, executes our program as we expected. Let me make it more clear. Source code is the script we create in Visual Studio projects by using C# language. Actually, the original text of any programming language is called source code. No matter it's written in C#, VB.NET, Python, Java, and so on. Source code is usually in plain text format, which means that you can use almost any text editor, such as Notepad, to edit your source code. But of course, a text editor like that usually doesn't have the ability to compile or debug your program. This is why we need an IDE tool. And the compiler is a program in Visual Studio transforms your code into a CIL. In the last video, when we press the Start button to run our Hello Robot program, Visual Studio activates the compiler to compile the source code into hello_robot.exe file. We can compile our programs not only by pressing the Start button, we can also use the 3 keys combination Ctrl+Shift+V on our keyboard to achieve the same purpose. We can even call the compiler directly from the Windows command prompt window to compile the program. But that requires more advanced knowledge for you, so I won't cover that part in this course. Using Visual Studio is enough. And in Visual Studio, we use the word build to refer to the action of compiling a program. And what is a CIL? It's a .exe file or a .dll file. For instance, the Hello Robot application created in the last video is transformed into an exe file. Do you remember in that video, I ran the program by double-clicking on the file called hello_robot.exe in Windows Explorer? That is a CIL. Usually, we don't use the word CIL to refer to our applications. We just say exe file when the compiled output is in a .exe format, or DLL to refer to a library component. After we have our exe file, if we want to execute it, the Common Language Runtime kicks in. Common Language Runtime, CLR for short, is the execution engine of .NET frameworks that handles running applications. Not all Windows applications need to use CLR to run. It's specific to applications created based on .NET Framework. Because .NET Framework-based programming codes are so-called managed codes. I'll explain the managed and unmanaged codes a bit later. For now, you just have to know that CLR is the middle layer between your application and the operating system. It translates the codes of your program into machine codes that the operating system understands during the programming execution process in order to run it. So if we match the architecture to what we did for our Hello Robot application, it looks like this. We write source code and build it by using Visual Studio. After the program is successfully built, it's transformed into either an exe or a DLL file. In our case, it's an exe file. Then when we run this application, the CLR transforms the exe into machine codes for Windows to run. That's the whole process of an application being transformed from source code to an executable program. We talked about managed and unmanaged codes earlier. Then what are they and what's the difference between them? Briefly speaking, managed codes are codes written in high-level languages such as C#, F#, and VB.NET. As I mentioned, codes written in .NET Framework-based languages are compiled into CIL and run under CLR's control, which means CLR manages how your codes run in the system. CLR provides better memory control and tab safety when running your code. Therefore, this is the reason it's called a managed code. So unmanaged codes, on the contrary, don't have CLR's protection. Programmers who develop those codes should take care of memory consumption on their own. So those codes might not be as safe as managed codes. Therefore, they are being called unmanaged codes. Unmanaged codes are not .NET Framework based and usually written in low-level languages such as C and C++. But which one is better, managed or unmanaged? Actually, this is not a right question. Each language has its purpose. The purpose of high-level languages is that we want to focus more on the application level, or say functions related to user experience during the development phase. So the existence of common language runtimes takes care of those complicated low-level things such as memory consumption and garbage collection for us, so that we don't have to worry about those things. And the low-level languages, on the contrary, provide us the ability to handle things more close to the operating system level or even the hardware level. So programmers who develop in low-level languages should have more knowledge of the operating system and the structure of the hardware. It's really troublesome sometimes when developing applications that deal with the low-level stuff. So if you really want me to answer which is better, I'll say it depends on your purpose. If you want to create something that's focusing on user interaction, then choose high-level languages. Choose C# of course. But if you want to do something with the operating system or hardware, then you can consider low-level languages such as C and C++. Okay, you've already learned how a program is transformed from plain text source code to an executable binary file. Next, we are going to take a look at the project file structure of a C# project. See you in the next video.